Back in January, I did my 21 movies that I was going to try and take down off of my watch list in 2025, and there are a few movies on that list that you said you'd be interested in getting full reviews for, and one of them, the most requested on the entire list, was As the Gods Will, which, if you didn't know, is often compared to a rather popular TV show called Squid Games, which is apparently a plagiarization of As the Gods Will. So I'm gonna find out today, and because this is all about playing children's games, it only felt relevant to wear my regret sweater again, because if I was in a death game that involved playing things from my childhood, somebody would have me speedrunning Search for Reptar on PlayStation 1. But if you don't know anything about As the Gods Will from 2014, let me quickly fill you in. As the Gods Will from 2014 is a Japanese death game horror. Second-year high school student Shun lives an ordinary teenage life until one day he is suddenly forced to participate in a series of children's games with death as the penalty for losing. With no knowledge who is behind these games, he is left with no other choice but to keep winning as his only means of protecting himself and possibly make it out alive. If you're new here, I go by Hordes, and if you're not new, welcome back. I talk about horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays, but as always, when it comes to watching movies that I have never seen before, I am now going to go and watch Squid Games off camera, so that way if you too want to watch the deadly death game where you play children's games, nothing will be spoiled for you, because nobody wants to watch a movie that you've just watched somebody else watch from start to finish, and I keep it spoiler free here on my channel because nobody, and I mean nobody, likes spoilers.
The games begin.
I would first like to say I fancy my chances in Squid Games over this, at least in Red Light Green Light, which is, yes, identical to the first game in this. She doesn't sing at you like the Durham does in this while he is threatening to explode in a confined space, and he cheats because he can hear you moving. This is going to be a difficult one to review, and that is because I'm going to be dancing around spoilers harder than Lady Gaga in the music video for Abracadabra, so bear with me on this one. I am going to try and do my best.
Dance or die.
These games are hard, and I mean really hard to win. And because of the setting of this, you have to both play into the idea of logic and common sense while simultaneously suspending your ideas of logic and common sense, because the world that this is set in, yes, it is our world, but there's way more going on in it. So when I say that anything can and absolutely will happen in these games, I mean that anything can and will literally happen in these games. In high stress situations, people tend to panic, and when you panic, you're not thinking logically or using any kind of common sense to work out how to win these games. But this is how you win these games, but you also have to think outside of the box at the same time. Let me try and explain a little bit. Example, the very first game in As the Gods Will is Grandma's Footsteps, or Red Light Green Light as it's known in Squid Games. Simply, if you get caught by the Durham doll, your head explodes, causing little red beads to drop all over the floor, making the floor incredibly slippy for the other players. On the back of the Durham doll is a big red button and a countdown. Now, common sense and logic say one person needs to press the button on the back of the Durham doll in order to win. But what if there were other stipulations and things going on within the game that you were unaware of, because anything and everything could possibly happen within the world of As the Gods Will. You need to take the risk, and that risk could mean success or death, but you don't know until you actually take that risk which of those two consequences that you have been dealt. And this means you kind of have to get creative and think a little bit out of the box because, again, it's not so cut and dry.
Cool! Like tunage!
This is a rare case to me because I actually liked the beginning of this movie way more than I liked the ending of this movie. Everything up to and including the fourth game in this, I was invested in. But the very ending of this movie is very open, and I feel like this was intentional, but not for the reason of, oh, leave it up to viewer interpretation. At the time that this movie was made, the manga for the second season of this was currently in production, so it feels like they were hoping that once the manga had enough volumes out, they could possibly make a sequel movie that followed on from the events of this one, or even possibly a TV show. So Yes, the opening does, like, the ending is intentional, but not for the reasons that would benefit the viewer. It's for the reasons that would benefit the pockets of those that were behind the production of this movie. It's been 10 years at this point since this movie came out, so let me tell you now, the ending isn't satisfying when you know that there is never going to be a sequel to it. But besides the games in this movie, there really isn't that much plot that tells you who all of these characters are and why you should be supporting them and rooting for them. And a lot of them just kind of feel like they're there to be general fodder, because you kind of work out very, very quickly who the remaining people are going to be in this game. They're the only people that have some kind of story around them, and it's really not that much story.
Who are these people?
This leads me on to the horror and the violence in this movie, which is all in games 1 through 4. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Game 5 is so mild compared to the literally explosive start that you get from game 1. But this does make sense in a death game. In the beginning, you have so many more players who are a lot more expendable, shall we say, which means you can kill off players in more creative and bloody and gory violent ways than you can do later on, because you need to be invested in who's left at the end of the game. Game 2, though, is my favourite of the entire movie. It is such a great mix of, like, gory and violent and, like, totally unexpected, and there's things in that game that I was not how you win that game is not quite so straightforward, like I was saying with all the games in this, but I was not expecting that to be how you win the game in this. But in a death game, it is not just the games themselves that you need to be wary of, and as always, you need to have eyes in the back of your head, because there are always going to be players that are ready to take you down at a second's notice when they think that you are the weak link or are holding the team back, or simply they need you gone so they can progress. And this is where As the Gods Will has got a solid character in this, because our little villain, let's just say you will be rooting for him to finally get his comeuppance in this, because dear God, does this kid have a god complex. There is a religious aspect to As the Gods Will. I mean, surprise, it's kind of there in the title. But what surprised me about this isn't any kind of religious interpretation that I can link to a specific religion. This is more of a, like, spiritually ambiguous kind of thing, in the sense of, like, it's a god, but it's not tied to ancient religion or modern religion. And depending on a person's personal beliefs, I think that you will interpret this part of the movie in a very different way to how someone like myself, who isn't religious in any kind of way, will interpret this movie. I don't think that either side of the argument is wrong, and I think that both sides of it are perfectly valid in this case, because they actually mirror the players within the game. There are those that think that this is some kind of, like, divine calling that they've been, like, tasked to do, and then there are others who have no idea why they're there in the first place and want everything and anything to just get out alive. There is so much more going on beneath the surface in As the Gods Will that I don't think is fully fleshed out. It might be fully fleshed out in the manga compared to the actual movie. I don't know, I've only read part of season 2 of the manga, so can't elaborate on this. But I think that this will put some people off, because it is a lot deeper than just your standard death game. I'm going to address the elephant in the room here, though, and say I have seen a number of discussions online saying that Squid Games is a plagiarization of As the Gods Will, so I'm just going to throw in my 2 cents on this and say, yes, there are an awful lot of similarities between Squid Games and As the Gods Will, but I also think that there are differences which help set them apart. Squid Games is very surface level compared to As the Gods Will. In Squid Games, everybody knows exactly why they are there. They are all competing for a cash prize. They know that they're going to be taking part in a series of games. And in As the Gods Will, the participants have no idea why they are there. Everybody outside of the situation knows what is going on because it's being broadcast on TV. But the actual players, they don't know why they are there. And they are simply playing through these games to try and survive. There is no financial motivation behind it. Squid Games is bright and colourful, and I would expect nothing else from a Korean TV show. Like, they are the brightest, most colourful, wacky, out there, competition shows. And As the Gods Will is very, it's muted in its colour palette with pops of colour, because in the beginning, they're trying to set up that you are in a familiar location that everybody kind of knows in some kind of way. And then as you realise that, no, you're not in this location, things start to shape and twist, and things become more colourful to the point where you get to games 4 and 5, and all of a sudden, they're like full-blown escape rooms. It's certainly not an apples and oranges situation. It's more like an oranges and grapefruit situation. They are both round citrus fruits that look identical from the outside, but inside, they are different enough where you can kind of enjoy both without stepping on the toes of the other one, as long as you like citrus fruits, or in this case, as long as you like elaborate death games with children's games as the main theme. If you get where I'm going with this.
No.
In the end, I am actually going to give As the Gods Will from 2014 a 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. I've certainly seen better death games. And the religious element does kind of throw me off in it. The very end game, game 5, and the ending do ruin this movie for me. Up to game 4 and including game 4, I was invested in this. And the second we hit game 5 and it was oh, we got this is game 5, I kind of lost interest, which is sad considering you would expect that last 20 minutes, half an hour to be the thing that pulls you the most into the movie. And for me, it did the opposite. But my opinion isn't the only one that matters, which begs the question, should you personally watch As the Gods Will from 2014? If you like your horror movies flavoured with death games, children's games, polar bears, Durham dolls, lucky cats, anything that is listed here, you will probably like As the Gods Will from 2014. So there you have it, my initial thoughts and my review for my first time watching As the Gods Will from 2014. If you have also seen this movie, I would love to know what your thoughts and opinions are on it down in the comment section down below. And if you are interested in watching this movie, I will leave a link in my description bar, like I always do, to where I found this movie online with English subtitles. I'll save you looking for it. If you would like to know where else you can find me, I am also over on Instagram and Letterboxd at HordesOfHorror, where I post every single horror movie that I watch, not just the ones that I talk about here on YouTube. But speaking of YouTube, I'll be back on Friday with another solo movie review, and I have no idea what I'm watching, so to make this a straightforward situation, as this video goes live, for the next 24 hours, there is a poll over my community page, so please go and vote for one of the 2 movies that I have listed there, and whichever one wins, that will be the video that comes up on Friday. So until next time, bye!